JC here from Toy News International, and for today's video I'm going to talk to you about 3 companies that pissed you off this week, and was it justified? But before we get into that, first of all, I just want to say that I really want to hear from you guys. There's a P.O. box address in the video description below, as all the videos that I do, and I really would love to hear from you as far as letters, artwork, questions, anything along those lines. You can also follow me on my Facebook and or Twitter pages. I'll have the links to those in the video description as well. But I would really love to, see things like your artwork. I know there's got to be some aspiring artists out there, and so, drop me a line in the P.O. box. Okay, so moving on, let's get into it. So the first company actually has done something pretty cool, but yet it still kind of ticked a lot of you off, and that's NECA Toys. So if you caught my video earlier this week, or you've been reading the news on the site, you know that NECA Toys announced a very cool Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. They're doing 2 different box sets that contain 4 figures each. The first set has the 4 turtles, and the second set has Shredder and 3 foot soldiers. And they're done in a paint scheme that's made to look like the classic 80s video game. And the sets are going to cost $100 each. And the thing that's kind of the kicker that's really kind of upset people is that the 2 sets are only going to be sold to those who attend Comic-Con. A lot of times with these exclusives, you'll see the companies, they'll sell them online afterwards to those who can't make it to the show. But in this case, at least what they're saying now is that's not going to happen with these. And the reason they're giving is essentially because the master toy license holder, Playmates, and the licensee, Nickelodeon, are not letting them sell these anywhere else. So a lot of you have been just simply upset at NECA because you think these are very cool, and I agree, these are awesome sets, but you're not going to be able to get them because you're obviously, a lot of you are not going to be able to attend San Diego Comic-Con this year, and so that means you're not going to be able to get it. And so that's upsetting a lot of you. And being upset not getting the figures is certainly justifiable, no question about that. But a lot of you have taken your anger towards NECA themselves, and I'm basing this just on the comments that I've been reading on our on the TNI Facebook page, and even the NECA Facebook page and stuff like that. So, a lot of you basically, resorting to making memes about NECA kicking you in the nuts and things like that. And it's not really NECA's fault because, if they could, they would sell these to everybody. And I don't really think it's fair to be mad at Playmates or Nickelodeon either, because, if you're the license holder, the master toy license holder for something, which means you paid a lot of money, and I guarantee you that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle license ain't cheap, you would want to protect your interest as well. And you wouldn't want a competitor selling something that's going to possibly take away from your own sales. So I don't think it's really fair to be upset to Playmates. Now I will say that I do kind of think that if Playmates isn't going to let another company fill that collector void, they need to do it themselves. They tried it and it didn't seem to really work for them with the classic figures. We got the Rocksteady Bebop and the 4 Turtles, and then movie versions of the Turtles, but I guess sales just weren't strong enough for them, and they discontinued the line, especially before we got the Shredder and the Krang figures that they had started to develop. Now there's nothing that says they won't go back and try and do that, but at this point, obviously they're not putting much emphasis on the collector market. And I understand that, the collector market is a small demographic compared to the larger kids market. I know a lot of collectors don't like to admit that, but it is true. And it's also cheaper. It's cheaper, kids aren't as critical on these things as you guys are. They don't care that if the paint apps aren't 100% or what have you, because they're playing with their toys. A lot of you, I think, forget what it was like to play with these toys as a young kid. So I don't really fault Playmates, but again, if they're not going to fill the void, they should let somebody else do it. Now I will say with NECA, even though right now they're saying it's not going to happen, these are only going to be sold at Comic-Con, they said something very similar when they started doing the 7-inch DC comic figures. We got the Michael Keaton Batman video game figure, and they swore that there would never be a regular comic book version or regular paint app version, movie version of that figure. And lo and behold, what happened? They found a way to get it released. And so I find it kind of hard to believe they would put the money into these molds knowing that it would only be sold at Comic-Con, because honestly they're not going to make their money back if they really can only sell these at Comic-Con. So I have a lot of faith that NECA will find some way to get some version of these, maybe not with the video game paint, but honestly, I'd rather see regular, these molds are basically based on the turtles as they appeared in the original 80s cartoon, and I would rather see figures of those in their cartoon colors as opposed to the video game. So even if it's not the video game versions, I have a lot of faith that NECA will get these figures into more people's hands than just those at Comic-Con down the road. So don't lose hope, and don't take your anger out on these companies. The alternative is they wouldn't be made at all, and you still wouldn't be getting them. So, try not to take your anger out on the companies. Okay, so the second one I want to talk about is Mattel. And Mattel obviously is not new to controversy when it comes to their collector lines. But in the latest happenings, if you haven't been following, and if you don't collect Masters of the Universe, you may not have. But basically, a couple weeks ago, one of their customer service representatives on their Facebook, their corporate Facebook page, not the Matty Collector Facebook, but their corporate Facebook page, and somebody asked a question about the Snake Mountain playset, and the representative basically indicated that it was not going into production, meaning that it's not going to be made, meaning it's going to be canceled. Now, I know some of you have tried to justify it by saying, oh, well, they meant it just hasn't gone into production yet. And I don't think if you read the statement, that that's what the intention of this person meant. I think they clearly meant that it's not happening. Now, there is some question of whether this person has enough knowledge to really be able to make the statement, or if they misspoke. These are customer service reps. They probably are just reading off of a computer screen and have no real practical knowledge of the product that they're talking about. That's often the case with these kind of things. And so it may be they misinterpreted the information that they read off the computer screen, or the information on the computer screen was simply wrong. I don't know. So that's why it hasn't been officially confirmed that the playset's been canceled. It's not that I don't think that this representative meant something other than what most of us have interpreted it as, but we're just not sure if that person had competent information. Now, here's where I think Mattel is kind of being a jerk. So if they decided not to make the playset, I think that's justifiable. If they do make this playset, I don't think it's going to be cheap, and I don't think that it's going to be tons and tons of sales. We're dealing with a small demographic of a small demographic of a small demographic who could afford it. And so I just don't think we're talking about huge sales numbers. And so if Mattel decided that it just wasn't worth the cost, I wouldn't really blame them for that. It is a cool playset. I would definitely love to see it made. But if they made the business decision that it's just not going to be profitable for them, I certainly wouldn't blame them for that. Where I am irked with them is the fact that their people let this slip, that it was essentially looked like it was not going to be released. And then instead of addressing the issue, either saying, hey, look, this person made a mistake, it was a miscommunication, it is coming, stay tuned for more details, or to put out an official statement to say, look, it's been canceled, and so on and so forth. They've just been silent. They've just been leaving people hanging. And I know they are aware of the situation. People have been posting on their Facebook pages, and which have just been ignored, while I see other, it's not like there's nobody watching their Facebook page, because I see other questions that get asked get addressed on their Facebook page, but they're deliberately ignoring these questions about Masters of the Universe and Snake Mountain. We've reached out to them a couple times trying to get an official statement from them about this, and basically just silence, which when a company doesn't want to say something, they have no problems with just basically not responding to us. So that's nothing new. But basically my issue is the fact that they're just willing to leave this hanging without, this is going on a couple weeks now, and they've yet to say anything. Now, there's also rumors out there that Masters of the Universe is canceled altogether. This is the last year for Masters of the Universe. And again, I think Masters of the Universe has had a good run. We've got a lot of good figures from the line, and really down to just reissuing the same characters with little different paint applications, or releasing such obscure characters that I'm not even sure Pixel Dan really knows who they are. So, I, again, wouldn't really fault them if they did decide to end the line, but I really think if that's the case, they need to get an official statement out there. Part of the problem is they released a list of all the brands that are going to be getting Comic-Con exclusives this year, and the one brand that was missing is Masters of the Universe. Again, it's not to say that Masters of the Universe won't get an exclusive. We are getting a She-Ra exclusive, I think, and that's probably going to be officially announced later today. So by the time you're watching this, you may know that. But as it is a specific Masters of the Universe Classic exclusive is looking more and more like it's not going to happen this year. So, you know, again, just leaving people hanging, I think is where I fault Mattel on this. And, you know, it just sends this message that we don't give a crap. So, you know, I don't really like to see that from any company. Okay, finally, the last company that seems to have pissed off a lot of people this week is Marvel Comics. And that is due to the new issue of Captain America, Steve Rogers' Captain America. So I'm assuming if you're at all into comics, you've heard about this controversy already. It's been trending on social media. Many sites from Time Magazine to the smaller comic book sites have been running stories on it. Everybody on Facebook, on my wall at least, has been talking about it. And so, spoiler alert, if by some chance you haven't read it, I'm going to talk spoilers here. But basically what happened in this issue, and this was the issue where Captain America was supposed to return to action. He's been old, decrepit, he lost his super soldier serum, and has now been returned to a young, vigorous self, and is returning as Captain America. So that's what this issue was originally billed as the return of Captain America. But what people found is that Marvel had this little plot twist that apparently Steve Rogers has been an agent of Hydra since day one. He's basically been a sleeper agent since the World War II days. And this has upset a lot of people. Now, I think that being upset over that, I think, is a little ridiculous. If you actually read the comic, then you'll see in the story, and this is my theory, but I think it's a pretty good one, that Red Skull, who has the powers of Professor Xavier, has been manipulating Rogers to thinking he's a Hydra agent. There's flashback scenes to when Rogers was a little kid, and his mother is approached, you know, he's got an abusive father, and his mother's approached by this Hydra agent to basically recruit her. Now, in these flashback scenes, everything is black and white, but one thing. This lady's hat has a red stripe on it, and it's the only color in these flashback scenes. So red for Red Skull. You know, these are obviously images being implanted in Steve Rogers' head by the Red Skull, who has Professor Xavier's powers. So I think that's pretty clear where they're going with this. But nevertheless, people have been outraged and been like, you know, this is wrong, this is ridiculous. I've even heard, you know, the usual death threats are going towards the writer and everything. So, you know, I read the issue, and I picked this issue up regardless because, you know, I'm a big Captain America fan and was picking it up anyway. But, you know, I actually thought this read was actually pretty good overall, and leaves me interested for the next issue. Now, I will say there are some pretty kind of big political overtones that are maybe pushing it a little bit. There's a question about, you know, how much, you know, should a writer be enforcing his political views on the readers, you know, which leave that for another time. But overall, I would say the story was not too bad. And I definitely, anyone who honestly thinks that Marvel's going to leave Steve Rogers as a Hydra agent permanently, I think is crazy. We saw this exact same thing with Spider-Man, you know, and others as well. But I haven't seen the outrage quite this bad since the Dan Slott Spider-Man story where they killed Spider-Man and replaced him with Dr. Octopus. And everybody was outraged. How dare they replace Spider-Man with Dr. Octopus? Now, I think that story ended, or overall was pretty good. I thought the ending was rushed, again, to make way for the next gimmick story. But the overall story and premise of it, I think, was pretty well done. And I have faith that this might turn out to be the same thing. So, you know, I don't think the read is bad. My problem, though, is with how Marvel Comics handled the marketing. And I don't necessarily blame them. I'm going to be honest, I put this more on you guys who have been outraged and making this trending. Most of you, or a lot of you, I think, were outraged without even having read the issue. And in part, that's Marvel's, you know, doing, which is where I fault, you know, don't like the tactic that Marvel used. So what Marvel did was they did a big interview with Time Magazine and had it basically ready to go yesterday morning before the issue really was even had a chance to get into people's hands. And in the article, they basically revealed the plot twist that Captain America is a Hydra agent. So all of a sudden, everything's circulating that Captain America's a traitor, he's a Hydra agent. You know, how can they treat their character like this? Blah blah blah. And that was done, in my opinion, on purpose. They wanted to get people angry, they wanted to get people outraged, and they wanted to get people talking. And the reason why they did that was to boost the sales of the comic. Also, it just happenstance that DC was releasing their big DC comic Rebirth, and instead of people talking about that, what were they talking about? Captain America. Now, I've done some checking with folks at comic book stores and stuff to see how the sales have been, and I'm happy to say that Rebirth sales have been very strong. Now, so have sales on this issue, which I think is where this marketing strategy came into play. And again, I can't blame a company for doing something to boost their sales. I don't like having a plot twist spoiled before I've even had a chance to read it. And I think it's, you know, people getting upset, especially to the point where they're making death threats, I think is doubly ridiculous. But, you know, if you're going to keep falling for these marketing ploys, then they're going to keep doing it. So, I mean, I'm not saying don't go read the issue. You know, like I said, it seems like a decent issue. But if you're just outraged, I mean, again, I guess anything that encourages people buying it, I'm not really upset about. But the outrage of something that's really kind of BS, I think is what's ridiculous. And it's the outrage that creates the headlines, which then creates the sales. So it's just it's a strategy I'm not fond of. You know, I hate it when it sacrifices a good ongoing story, you know, where they basically have to cut things short to start laying the groundwork for the next gimmick story. That's what pisses me off the most about these gimmicks. You know, it's not that I think Steve Rogers is going to be Captain America or a traitor. It's not that I think Spider-Man's been killed. So that's what I don't like about these things, and where my anger is kind of coming from. Not the story itself, because again, I think this has potential to be a decent story. Okay, so that's where I'm going to leave it now. I'm going to go play the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, so that's how I'm going to spend the rest of my afternoon. Mutants in Manhattan, I started playing a little bit last night. If you ever played Transformers Devastation, very similar, only instead of Transformers, you've got Turtles. Animation seems to be pretty good. I only played a little bit of the first stage, so I really haven't gotten that far in the game. But until next time, Hail Hydra!